Hey, welcome back to MDO Crochet. For this tips, tricks, and item mix video, this video is going to be a little bit different. I was asked by a few subscribers to do an anatomy of Tunisian stitches. That would be a little bit impossible to do every stitch, so I did the base anatomy. And I did some explanations. But if you stick around, we'll get to it. So the anatomy of a Tunisian stitch starts the same as crochet. The very first thing to start with is a slip stitch. So with a slip stitch, I'm going to show you an easy way to do one if you don't know how to do one. So you'll take the yarn, just lay it in your hand, and bring your ring finger and your pinky, bring them in. Hold that there, and then take your thumb and hold it onto your middle finger. You'll take your yarn, wrap it around your pointer and your middle finger, and just keep wrapping it around. Now, when the two meet, you're going to take the yarn that is coming from your ball of your skein and go above. Lay it above. So when you do this, it's an easy way to do a slip stitch because you can take your needle now, go under, and then go over, hook the yarn, and pull it up, twist your finger, pull your fingers out. Now you have a slip stitch. And it's a quick, easy slip stitch instead of sitting there tying and tying and tying. Now the next step in the anatomy of a Tunisian stitch is just like regular crochet, the chain. So to do a chain, because you have your slip stitch on your needle, to do a chain, you just yarn over, hold your chain still, and pull through. And that's the process you're going to continue until you get the desired length or however many chains you need for whatever project you're doing. And that's all it is. It's just a repetitive motion. This is what starts your project in either crochet or even in Tunisian. And you just continue. Find a way to hold it that is comfortable for you, because everybody holds their chain differently to keep their tension. Because your tension in your chain still matters, because that can mess up the rest of the stitch or the rest of your project if you have a loose chain and tight stitches. Then you have like a little wavy action going on. Now the next step in Tunisian, the next step in the anatomy of the stitch, is fairly simple. Now you see we have our forward facing chain. They look like chains. Now the back is where it gets different. You have your chains, you can see them, but then you have a little bump in between each chain. I'm going to lay it down here so we can see it better. You have a bump between here, here. You just have little bumps. Well, in 90% plus of Tunisian stitches and patterns, you're going to be pulling your loops through there. You're not going to be pulling them through the chain. Now, there are patterns that require you to go through the chain. There are a few stitches that require you to go through the chain as well. But you can do that when you encounter those. Now, the bumps, how you determine which bump you're going into is you have a loop on your hook already. And then you have the chain that loop is coming out of. And then you have one right behind it, below. That's the one where you're going to be pulling your loop out of. So you're going to keep your finger at it. So you'll count down 1, 2. On the second one down, flip over, and your bump is going to meet you right away. And you're just going to pull up your loops in your bump. And you're going to keep your loops on your hook this whole entire time. Loops stay on your hook. That's the difference between crochet and Tunisian. So Tunisian can be is a close cousin to knitting. Just we're doing it with a crochet needle, a long crochet needle. So you'll continue pulling up your loops in every bump. And this is the beginning of your foundation row. And what the foundation row is, it's the row that determines your project, the foundation row is your most important row, in my honest opinion. I'm going to go ahead and finish pulling up the loops on the foundation row, and we'll talk about the next part of the stitch. Okay, so I'm down at the end. And yes, you still have to go through the last chain, which has a bump in it too. So you just pull up your loop. Go ahead and pull it up. This is the start of your foundation row. Like I said, this determines everything about your project. And you need to keep the same tension. I know it's hard to keep same tension most of the time. But with Tunisian, you have to watch your tension. Tunisian will curl. 90% of the stitches will curl. Now there are anti-curling stitches, such as the purl or reverse stitch, and there's a combination of those stitches that won't curl, like the honeycomb. And then there's also stitches that will do nothing but curl, and the only thing to do with that is you can loosen your tension, use a bigger needle, or you can just deal with it at the end and fix it at the end, which is once your project is done, you can block it, wet block it if it's a natural fiber, or if it's acrylic, you can steam block it, and that'll get rid of your curl. So the next part of the anatomy of a Tunisian stitch is the return pass. So you have your loop up. So you'll yarn over and you'll chain one. Just chain one. And then you're going to yarn over, and then you're going to pull through two. Yarn over, pull through two. Yarn over, pull through two. This is known as your return pass. So yarn over and pull through two. Yarn over, pull through two. Yarn over, pull through two. Yarn over, pull through two. And it just repeats until you only have one stitch left on your hook. Now the return pass can be different per stitch. Some stitches require an extra chain after each pull through. Some don't. And that is all dependent on stitch. That's also dependent on the stitch pattern you're using, or even the item pattern. So you'll have to pay attention to the maker, or the stitch pattern. So all you do is you continue until you only have one loop left on your hook. Now that is your foundation row. That is the base for 99% of all Tunisian stitches. That's how you start them. So with the foundation row, you have several stitches. So what you're going to do is you're going to see a bunch of 2 bars. You got a front bar, right there, and then you have a back bar, right there. Now these 2 bars determine your stitches 90% of the time. There are stitches that do not require these bars. There's a stitch that goes in between the gaps between the two, because you have a gap, as you can see, in between each set of bars. and you can work in those. Now, if you're going to go through the front of the bar and pull up your loop, or you're going to go through the back of the bar, the back bar, and pull up a loop, or are you going to go through the middle, split the two bars, and then pull up a loop? And then there's other aspects to this that get used. So the other aspects are, if you turn your work just a little bit, you're going to see little bumps right here. Right above there, you're going to see little bumps. You can work into those. That's a different stitch. You also have a chain. Between each bar, you can work into that. But majority of the stitches that you're going to work with are going to use this bar or the back bar, or it may be used in between, splitting the bars, or you may just use the gaps. And sometimes you may put 2 or 3 in a gap, or 2 or 3 in a bar, or 2 and 3 in a chain. That's all stitch dependent. But this is your base anatomy for Tunisian. This makes up your future project. Knowing the front bar and the back bar difference, front bar, back bar, see it right there, or you got the split, where you can split the two, or you have the gap. And then you have the bump on top, and then you have the chain in the middle, in between the two. So the stitches are dependent on those aspects right there. And then to do your return pass, when you're doing your return pass on a built-up row, it's always the same spot. And I will meet you there in just a second. All right, I'm almost at the end. I just did simple stitches all the way down. So you want to know how to get the end perfect every time. So what you'll do is take your needle, pull it back just a little bit. Don't let your stitch come off, but just pull it back just a tad. Take your needle, rotate it down to the row you just closed off, that you pulled all those loops from. Just rotate it down. Take your work, fold it onto your hook, and you're going to go right where you need to go. Then you'll pull up your loop as normal, and then chain one, and then do your return pass. But what you're looking to do while you're here, let me pull out a little bit. What you're looking to do is you have a V right there, and then right behind that V is a little bar. You're splitting the V in that little bar. Just how that needle is going through. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to split the little bar from the V. And that's how you do a perfect edge every time. And your needle will go where it needs to go. Like I said, just take your needle, drop down to the row you just pulled your loops off of, fold your end, take your end, fold it onto your needle, and you're gonna slide right where you need to go. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, chain one, yarn over, pull through two, start your return pass. That is the anatomy pretty much of every stitch. Now there are a few stitches that are different. There are a few that require you to drop down 2 rows while building up on a 4th row. such as the block stitch or the alpine. There are some rows that require you to do 15 or to do 6 chains before you do your next pull through. There are some stitches that require 3 chains and then pull through 2, 3 chain, pull through 2, pull through 2. But that's all dependent on stitches, and you're not going to run across those all the time, but you will, because the forward pass and the return pass are what makes the stitch. I can do the simple stitch all day long, but if I change up the return pass, well, now it's not the simple stitch, it's a different stitch. So you can do a knit stitch, and which is the knit stitch is just go between the 2 bars in each little section, because it has 2 bars. You're just going to split it and go back and pull up a loop. That's how you get the knit stitch. And if you change up the return pass, the knit stitch will look different. So the forward pass and return pass play together and help make the stitch. And that is, my friends, pretty much the basic anatomy of Tunisian stitches. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you have, please give me a like and subscribe. And leave me a comment, because I will chit-chat with you. And remember, folks, keep stitching.